Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first session in American English Live Series 18. We are so excited that each of you are here with us today. My name is Chris, and I'll be with you today along with my colleague behind the scenes, Dorea, who will be moderating, helping answering your questions and responding to your comments during the session. So let's begin today with these wonderful audience comments from our most recent webinar, Open Educational Resources for English Language Teaching with Kendra Staley. First up, we have Patricia from Peru. Patricia said, "This session was great. It was really informative and engaging. We can all benefit from these open educational resources and from respecting all copyrights, of course." Next up, we have Mohammed from Afghanistan. "Thank you for sharing the OER website. This resource can help me improve my students' linguistic repertoire by teaching many aspects of language, such as culture, grammar, vocabulary, reading, writing, and more, with the use of authenticated and updated materials." And finally, we have Edgar from the Philippines. "Thank you so much for this great webinar. It is helpful to me as an English teacher in training who sometimes has difficulty finding the right materials. I found this webinar about open educational resources, or OERs, really beneficial. Thank you, and I look forward to more." Thank you, Edgar. So we love to see our teacher participants actively engaged in professional development. So please continue to share your thoughts about our webinars by offering feedback through the end of session quiz form or by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@fhi360.org. We may feature one of your comments during the next session. Throughout Series 18, we'll be exploring the themes of social emotional learning and integrating critical thinking in ELT. We hope you will be able to use the practical ideas we share. Are you eagerly awaiting one of these sessions? Let us know which one in the chat. So here's what to expect today. The session is about 60 minutes long. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make comments too. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address your ideas and experiences. Please share your thoughts using the comments feature or chat box. When our session comes to a close, you'll have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the webinar, we'll share a link in the comments. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly. Once you have successfully passed the quiz, you can expect to get your badge via email within about a week. And before we begin, we want to let you know about one of our current massive open online courses, or MOOCs, Creating and Implementing Online Courses. In this free course, participants will learn powerful tools for creating and implementing online courses for students using the ADDIE model for instructional design. The course is open now and runs through September 25th. Use the link being shared by the moderator now to learn more and enroll today. And now for today's webinar, Improve Student Communication by Developing Social Emotional Skills. Most ELLs generally want to learn to communicate in English. However, if we educators focus solely on key language topics, listening, speaking, reading, writing, and grammar, we ignore an essential component of communication, social emotional skills. In this webinar, we'll learn about the benefits of helping students improve their emotional intelligence. We will consider how to help students process their thoughts and emotions and interact with others in a respectful and empathetic way. The best interactions and relationships in any language are more than the result of using language rules correctly. By incorporating social emotional learning in our classrooms, we can help our students build the lifelong skills needed to be successful communicators. And now we are pleased to introduce our presenter, Laura Leslie. Laura has taught English to adults in her home state of California, university students in China and Saudi Arabia, and secondary students in various summer programs. After completing her MA in Intercultural Service, Leadership, and Management from the SIT Graduate Institute, Laura oversaw ESOL programs at a nonprofit supporting refugees and low-income immigrants. She has served as a U.S. Department of State Virtual English Language Fellow, working with pre-service teachers and access students in El Salvador and entrepreneurs in the Caribbean. Most recently, as a virtual English language educator, she designed and taught a course for game developers in Turkey. Currently, Laura teaches EFL in Bilbao, Spain, and co-facilitates the English language program's Fiction Book Club. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for that introduction, Chris, and welcome everyone to improve student communication by developing social emotional skills. I am excited to be here today to talk about this topic and to hear what you do with your students. Before we go over our agenda, I want to comment on the feelings that you shared in the word cloud and the chat box. I think it's important that we are self-aware, and so I appreciate knowing that the feelings today range from tired to perfect. So first, today we are going to go over our agenda. We will define social emotional learning, known as SEL, and emotional intelligence, known as EI or EQ. Then we will discuss the benefits of SEL/EI in communication. Next, we will explore practical applications of SEL/EI elements in English language classrooms. And we will end by considering how to include SEL/EI in your lesson plans. There are great webinars on American English about SEL if you want to learn more about the topic, but I will start with some definitions to make sure that we're on the same page. Social emotional learning is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, the skills, and attitudes to develop healthy relationships, manage emotions, personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. Emotional intelligence is the ability to regulate our own emotions, to recognize the emotions of people and feel empathy toward them, and to use these abilities to communicate effectively and build healthy relationships, productive relationships with others. As you can see, they're similar. They both talk about emotions, empathy, relationships. However, SEL does have another element, which is responsible decision-making, but I do consider this to be a result of high emotional intelligence. Today, I will be using SEL and EI somewhat interchangeably, and that's mainly because I teach mostly adults, and when I teach business English, the term is more recognized. However, the key takeaway is the same, which is helping our students build their social emotional skills so that they can improve their communication. Now it's your turn. I would like you to share your perspective on how emotional intelligence impacts a student's ability to communicate with classmates in an English language classroom. You can share your response in the chat or in the comments. And I would like you to note that when you see this icon on the slide, it means I'm asking you a question and I would love to hear your answers. So do please share throughout the session today.
Yeah, everybody, let us know. Share your perspective on how emotional intelligence impacts students' ability to communicate with classmates in an English language classroom. Please share in the chat box and I'll share with everybody in our audience. Let's see, Laura, let's see what we have coming in.
Can everyone think a little bit?
Yeah, I have a few ideas. I know emotional intelligence, when I think of it, I think it fosters really like a positive and harmonious classroom atmosphere for me. We got lots of people saying good morning and hello and welcome, Laura. They're so happy to be here. People from all over the world. We have Sadia saying students will be more creative. That's wonderful. We have Ikapen takes away the filter for learning. And Anteso says creates a warm and friendly atmosphere. Marcella says it impacts in a positive way so they can feel more confident. We have Mohammed saying that it impacts the child's self-confidence And we have Nala saying is connected to effective communication skills. And we have Natalia saying students feel more comfortable and are able to speak with others. And lots of people are just saying this is a great topic. We have lots of great comments. Keep them coming throughout the session today, everybody.
Yay. Sounds like everyone understands that emotional intelligence, teaching that to our students would be very helpful. So I'm excited. Today, we're going to focus on 4 elements that SEL and emotional intelligence have in common, and I will give a short definition for each. So self-awareness, knowledge of your own emotions, motives, and character. So how you're feeling, why you do things, and your personality. Social regulation, the ability to manage your emotions and behaviors. Social awareness, the ability to recognize the thoughts and feelings of others and empathize. And a quick definition for empathy, the ability to understand or feel what another person is experiencing. And relationship management, establishing and maintaining positive relationships. The title of my presentation is Improve Student Communication by Developing Social Emotional Skills, because communication is more than having a wide vocabulary and knowing grammar rules. We're communicating with people, which means that emotions play a role. I want to make sure that you understand why I believe that building strong social emotional skills is important to helping our students communicate better. To do this, I'm going to ask you 4 questions. You do not need to write the answers in the chat, but I do want you to think about each situation. So first, have you ever expressed anger, but in reality felt sadness or fear? Second, have you said or done something on impulse, but then regretted it? Third, have you tried to tell someone about a mistake they made when they were upset? And fourth, have you had to work with someone you didn't feel cared about your feelings? If anyone here is able to say no to all of those questions, I want to talk to you because I feel I'm doing something wrong. But I think that's life. We have these situations all the time. I like this quote because of how it summarizes the importance of social emotional skills in communication. If we listen to others' feelings and try to understand the emotions they are experiencing or expressing, our communication becomes a meaningful exchange for both of us. This helps us to avoid unnecessary conflicts in our life. In addition to helping students communicate better in and outside the school, emotional intelligence is associated with academic achievement. Emotional intelligence is the more reliable predictor of academic achievement than is the IQ. This means that having social emotional skills contributes more to a student's achievement at school than their academic brain power, that is, their ability to acquire and use knowledge. I am sure that the reason you are all giving up an hour of your time to be here in this webinar today is because you want your students to succeed. And I hope that you will leave with some tangible ideas to support them. So again, your turn. Given the 4 elements and benefits we have discussed, what are your initial feelings about incorporating SEL/EQ into your language classrooms?
Yeah, everybody, let us know in the chat box your feelings about these 4 elements that Laura shared and the benefits that she has discussed. What are your initial feelings about incorporating SEL and EQ into your language classrooms? Let us know in the chat box. So I know I have some feelings too, Laura, but I want to hear our wonderful audience share some of theirs.
That's what the topic is today, emotion.
Yeah, emotion, yes, that's great. So I often think of my kind of first thought is just kind of like enhanced communication in the classroom. We have Marina saying it may be helpful for both teachers and students. It'll create a healthy learning environment. Yes, maybe some improved language proficiency. Concern says, I feel hopeful students can change their attitude towards learning. Lots of people just saying that it's a feeling good, it's a vital element in the process of learning. Nalia says, I think that it is quite important, especially for my students who are pre-service English teachers. If they use it in my classes, they would apply it in their classes when they become teachers. Thank you, Nalia, that's a great comment. And Valerie says, a soft power could equip students with self-control, social awareness, and be a good decision maker. Lydia says her first impression is challenging. Mohammed says joining and engaging are the first step. And Bobby says helping students learn in a more positive environment. And Hamisu says language learning cannot take place without emotional stability of the students. Wonderful comments, everybody. Keep them coming.
Thank you for those. Again, everyone seems like we're on the same page, the importance behind emotional intelligence. I did hear the challenge out there, and I agree, it can be challenging. It's not that we always want to think about emotions and acknowledge those and bring those out in the classroom, which is why I'm hoping that today will give you some ideas of how to do that. So now that we have defined social emotional learning and emotional intelligence, and we discussed the benefits of SEL and EI in communication, we will explore practical applications of SEL/EI elements in the English language classroom. First, we will talk about self-awareness. Being aware of your feelings is the first step to managing them. If you can't identify your feelings, how can you communicate them? Earlier, I asked you, have you ever expressed anger, but in reality felt sadness or fear? Students need to be able to understand what they are feeling so that they can communicate it effectively. One way to help students recognize and label their emotions is by having them reflect. In an English language classroom, this can be achieved via a poll. But to practice writing, this can be done through a journal. You can give them prompts to write about at the beginning of class, after an activity, or at the end of class. Here are some possible reflection questions. How are you feeling? Why do you feel that way? How do you feel about the activity we just did? Did you find the activity helpful? If so, why or how? How difficult was that activity on a scale of 1 to 5? How confident do you feel about? As you can see, you can always add follow-up questions. Also, you will notice that the questions are general questions, so you can ask these in whichever lesson you're teaching. I have said that self-awareness is needed for strong social emotional skills, but how can we name a feeling in a different language, in this case, English is the target language, if we don't have the vocabulary? So learning emotion words helps us recognize what we are feeling and allows us to be able to tell others what we are feeling. There are many ways to introduce vocabulary about our feelings. I like showing a popular animated movie trailer that talks about emotions, specifically joy, anger, sadness, disgust, and fear. I usually provide images for these emotions and then go over synonyms with some varying degrees. If you don't have technology to show a video or pictures, you can always use your face to gesture different emotions. So Chris, let's see if you can guess my emotions by looking at my facial expressions. So first.
Oh, I'm going to say sadness, Laura.
Correct. What about?
Ooh, how about disgust?
Ding, ding. And last one.
Oh, I love that one. Joy. That's great. And I want to share a couple comments with you too, Laura. There's some great questions and comments coming in. We have Ma Elena Espinoza saying that I think it is very important to incorporate EQ, since by feeling understood, our students will learn better and take as much advantage as possible during class. It's a wonderful comment.
Definitely. That's the goal, to be able to help our students engage more, right?
Absolutely.
Good.
And then one other comment too, we have Nala saying that she uses emojis for this stage and asks her students to indicate one emoji and explain. And I think that's great. The new English teaching forum that just went live yesterday has a similar activity using emojis and emotions. So that's wonderful.
That is great. And emojis are definitely another great resource if you don't want to try to make all of the different expressions. Emojis are a quick way to show them. And then you can also practice charades with your students, which will let your students use their whole body to express an emotion. So there are plenty of ways to get our students to understand what an emotion might look like.
Great. And just one more comment, Laura. We have Mohammed saying that expanding the vocabulary helps students articulate their feelings better. Reflective writing helps students process their experiences and emotions. It encourages them to write about positive and negative events, helping them practice self-reflection. It's a great comment, Mohammed. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, all emotions are not always positive, and we do want them to be able to reflect on both types. Thank you. All right, so for comprehension, I like having students read sentences and choose the correct feeling to complete it. I usually project these questions on the board and have students do them in small groups so they can help each other. But of course, you can always do it as a whole class or in pairs. So an example sentence: Carl is always envious, afraid, grumpy in the morning. He doesn't like talking to anybody. Chris, which feeling would you choose to complete this sentence?
Okay, I would say Carl is always grumpy in the morning. He doesn't like talking to anybody.
Thank you. That is correct. So yeah, the idea is that maybe if they don't know the words, they'll help each other, but we've gone over the vocabulary, so with the clues, they can figure that out. If you haven't seen my pre-webinar resource, it is called Nurturing EI Through Literature. It gives several ideas for teaching emotional intelligence through literature. Here I have a short story and some possible reflection questions. I will read the story to you. So, not my home. The salesman knocked on the door of the big house. A little boy answered, "Is your mummy home?" asked the salesman. "Yes," said the little boy, and slammed the door. The salesman was perplexed and a little annoyed. He knocked again, and the boy opened the door. "Can I speak to her?" asked the salesman. "This is not my home," replied the little boy, closing the door again. So as you can tell, it's a bit of a funny story, kind of like a joke, but it does serve for the purpose of literature. And so here we have some reflection questions, and you'll notice the first two are shorter. They're just yes or no questions. So is the salesman happy? Is the salesman angry? So you're just getting the students to think about those emotions. However, if you have higher level students, you can have more open-ended questions. You can start to make connection between the students' emotions and the experiences. So you can see those in italics. Why does the salesman get annoyed? Can you name some of the feelings that the salesman might be feeling? Have you ever felt that way? If so, what happened to make you feel that way? And I want to note that in this story, they do give us a couple actual feelings, but you can try to explore more. Obviously, go with some synonyms also to practice some more of the vocabulary that you studied. All right, so your turn again. What is another question that you can ask your students to help them make a connection between the reading passage and their own emotions?
Everybody, let us know in the chats another question that you can ask your students to help them make a connection between the reading passage Laura just read and their own emotions. Laura, we do have lots of people just commenting about the emotions of the salesperson, saying grumpy or angry or all different types of emotion, or wasn't happy. But yeah, we want to know what other types of questions you could ask your questions. So let's see, Laura, we have someone saying, what would you do? What would you say? And Valerie says, if you were the boy, how would you react to the situation and why? We have Nagar saying, have you ever felt that way? Or how would you feel if you were the salesman? And Ersa says, if you were the salesman, what are you going to do? And then Val says, I ask my students to feel the same situation, but to put themselves in the salesman's shoes. Yeah, we have someone else saying that they would ask their students about how did the emotion of the salesman or the boy in the passage relate or resonate to their own personal feelings. These are all great questions, everybody. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for sharing. They definitely sound like good ideas. So once I know that students have the vocabulary, I have them practice using it orally. One way you can have your students practice using new vocabulary and talking about their emotions is by having them answer some questions connected to a previous activity. For lower level students, you can use sentences that they completed with the correct emotion. So for example, do you remember my sentence, Carl is always grumpy in the morning. He doesn't like talking to anybody. In small groups, students could answer, do you feel grumpy in the morning? If not, how do you feel? Or when do you not like talking to people? For higher levels, you could use the longer text. So for example, using the story I shared about the salesman, students could discuss what are similarities and differences between what causes you to get annoyed and what caused the character annoyance in the story. Or the salesman was perplexed. How do you show confusion in your body or face? We can also teach emotion words in grammar lessons. So if you're teaching a grammar point, you can create sentences to practice it. Let's say you want students to practice the present tense and the third person S. You can have sentences where students complete them by adding the correct form. So for example, she blanked joy or he blanked anger. Chris, can I please have you complete these sentences using the correct form of the verb in the parentheses?
Absolutely. Let's see. So for A, I would say she feels joy. And for B, I would say he does not feel angry.
Perfect. And now let's say you want to practice using subordinating conjunctions in addition to choosing the correct emotion word. You can provide students with subordinating conjunctions like while, before, and when, and then have students choose one to complete the sentence. So mom was so delighted, homesick, angry with me, blank, she saw that my room was really untidy. Chris, can I have you again complete this sentence?
Yes, of course. Let's see. I would complete the sentence by saying, Mom was so angry with me when she saw that my room was really untidy.
Correct. Thank you for helping me with those. So the idea is that depending on your level, you can play with what you already started in class for sentences. So I know that we do not all teach the same students. We teach different levels, different ages, in different countries. So I want to give you a moment to think about your students' needs. What grammar point or topic could you use with your class to practice emotion words?
Yeah, everybody, let us know what grammar points or grammar topics could you use with your class to practice emotion words. Let us know in the chats. We'd love to hear what you think about what types of topics or grammar points. Let's see, Laura, we have Bobby saying they would practice comparatives and superlatives, just present simple tense. For example, I always feel calm when I meditate. We have lots of people saying practicing the present tense and conditionals. Joma is saying personalities. Hamisu saying if conditional. We have lots of people just saying present, past simple adjectives. We have someone saying modal verbs such as can, could, might. They give a nice example. She must be very happy about the news. And we have Zenefe saying use of present simple tense and practicing description. We have Basum saying family relations. We have Jose Luis Cabala saying superlatives. So lots of great topics people would use with their class to practice emotion words. Thank you so much, everybody. Wonderful.
Yes, I love it. Thank you. After we recognize and understand our emotions, the next step is to be able to manage them. A student who can access an effective strategy for feeling better can focus better in class, on assignments, and act less impulsively. Remember at the beginning of the webinar, I asked you if you've acted in impulse and regretted it? When teaching our students the English language, we want them to be able to listen to others effectively and express themselves. This requires self-regulation. So is there anyone here who communicates better with more stress in their life? I imagine the answer is no. In fact, the opposite. We communicate better when we have less stress and are more calm. As self-regulation is a social emotional skill, I find it helpful to encourage mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of being aware of your body and feelings in the present moment, thought to create a feeling of calm. This is why I wanted to start our session by asking you how you felt. I wanted you to be self-aware. It is important to check in with ourselves. Now, I want to show you a mindfulness activity that I do with my students. I chose it for 3 reasons. First, my students really enjoy it. Second, it helps them adopt strategies for managing their own emotions. And third, few resources are needed. I start by introducing a simple definition which breaks down mindfulness. So paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Then I also introduce any needed vocabulary, such as grateful or self-talk statements. I usually make the questions visible for my students by giving them, either they're on the slide that I'm showing online or they're on the projector in the classroom, but you could write them on the board. You could have students write them down and keep them to do the activity later. Repeat later, I should say. Once I know that my students understand the vocabulary needed to complete the exercise, I say that we will be doing the following 5 things. And then I show them the items that you're looking at. I tell them that first I will read them and then we will do them together. But to save time today, I will read the 5, but we will only be doing the first and the 4th. So we're going to start with the deep breaths. I will count us off. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I hope that felt good for everyone. And the second activity is going to be the 4th, thinking of positive self-talk statements. Now I want to show you possible ways to introduce positive self-talk statements. You can share some sentence stems with your students, such as I can, I will, I am, and then emphasize that these are positive statements. So we don't want negative words such as can't, never, not, or won't. And you can see in the examples, I can learn this, I will figure out the answer, I am resourceful. Depending on your student's age, you can adapt the task. So you can, for example, ask small children, instead of self-talk statements, to think about something they're good at. Or instead of saying they're grateful, they can say something they like at home or at their school. So your turn, use a sentence stem to create a self-talk statement for yourself. I'm excited to hear what you come up with.
Yeah, everybody, use a sentence stem to create a self-talk statement for yourself. Please share your statement in the chat or comments. Let's see, Laura, we have some comments coming in. Someone saying, Lydia saying, I am relaxed. That's great, Lydia. Me too. After that nice breathing exercise Laura did. And Gada says, I can teach this. And Awadif says, I am calm and centered. And Claudia Torres says, I am always capable. And Alio says, I can read it. And then we have Mark Lawrence, Antonio Fernandez saying, I can be an inspiration to others. I love that. And Yoma says, I can use mindfulness with my students. And Vivian says, I am happy. We have Laura says, I will have a great class today. And Ofa says, I can do everything. I will succeed. I am brilliant. And there are lots of people saying, I'm feeling great, or I'm feeling good, or I love what I'm doing now. These are wonderful self-talk statements, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yes, thank you. I love it. So once students can identify their own emotions, we want them to be able to read others' emotional signals, and have empathy. Have you considered that someone learning a new language must learn the language of empathy in order to recognize and express it? So empathy, remember, is the ability to imagine and understand what another person is thinking or feeling. The language of empathy includes acknowledging feelings, validating them so that the person feels understood, and explaining that any positive actions are for their well-being. I like to share scenarios with my students for two reasons. First, to help them understand how and why we need to be able to self-regulate. And second, so they can analyze feelings and determine appropriate responses. I briefly discussed the scenario with students to ensure that we have the same point of view about what is appropriate and what empathy is. Now I will role play with Chris so that you can get an idea of how the conversations with my students go. Chris, if I am mad because I just realized my partner didn't do their part of their presentation, but find out that their pet died, do you think it would be helpful for me to start the conversation saying, I feel frustrated?
Probably not, because although you do have a presentation to prepare for, your partner still might be thinking about their pet.
And why do you say that?
Well, I mean, losing a pet seems like a sad thing, and maybe it is the reason your partner hasn't done their part of the presentation.
Do you know what empathy is?
Yes, I think empathy is understanding someone else's feelings.
Yes, empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings that others have. In this case, you would think about how you have felt when you lost something you cared a lot about, a pet or something else. And then you would think how you would want your partner to talk to you or support you. And so I think that very smart that you picked up on really the partner might be stuck on the pet. So thank you for role playing, Chris. As everyone can see, the conversation is not very long. The goal is just to ensure that students understand that it is helpful to be aware of our environment and the emotions of those around us, and to explore different feelings that people might have and choices to respond. I try to elicit helpful words that can be said or actions that can be taken. So, as said earlier, the language of empathy acknowledges others' feelings and makes them feel understood. You can ask questions to introduce or reinforce conditionals using if. So, what if you were in that situation? What if this happened to me? How would I feel? Why would I feel that way? And then here are some possible empathetic responses. I can see that you are upset. You sound very worried. It must be hard for you. I'm sorry this has been so tough for you. It's understandable that you feel that way.
Laura, we have a few questions coming in, if I may. We have Celia saying she's got a question about how would teachers help learners with emotional challenges in the classroom? Do you have any advice for Celia about how teachers would help learners with emotional challenges in the classroom?
And when you say emotional challenges, I'm picturing things like students getting very upset and they are no longer able to really focus or communicate effectively. And so trying to teach them to regulate is what I'm picturing in my classes. So if someone's getting upset, taking that moment, how are you feeling? And then can we take some deep breaths? Like trying to get them to kind of center on that feeling and regulate that feeling. Because if beyond that, it's hard for me to be able to get them to move anywhere else. So that's being able to control that feeling. And so acknowledging it is the first step, and then kind of trying to soothe it, to me, would be the next step. And maybe they need a moment, right? Maybe journal for a little moment, or take a breath, or get some water, but something to kind of help them calm down. But being aware that the feeling they're having is leading, or it's part of the problem, I guess I would say. The lack of self-regulation of that feeling.
Wonderful. That's great advice, Laura. And we just have one more question too from Mohammed. Mohammed's wondering, what's the difference between empathy and sympathy?
Yeah. And so sympathy being this idea that you kind of acknowledge someone's having a hard time, but you just kind of feel bad, like, oh, that sucks to be them. Oh, that's such a bad situation. But you don't really put yourself in their shoes and decide, how could I talk to them differently if their pet died, right? You don't validate the feeling necessarily to them. You just observe and maybe like, oh, that's so bad. And even if you do, and you just say, that's a horrible situation. I understand that you might be distracted because you're thinking about your pet that you had for 10 years and passed away over the weekend. That's a bit more meaningful of a connection than just like, oh, sucks that you lost your dad, your pet, either way. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's great advice. And just one more question before we move on to the next parts, Laura. Someone's asking about young learners. How would you deal with teaching this with young learners who have difficulty with their listening skills?
Yeah, I imagine that always breaking things down into little short sessions. We all have some attention span issues nowadays, right? With social media. But the idea, especially with kids, so I think someone mentioned emojis, right? So when we're teaching those in little small sessions, at first we're talking about emojis, maybe they're running to the board to choose the correct one, using that movement to have them be able to stay focused and active. And then when, describing situations, if you give a scenario, you won't use maybe such a long scenario. In some circumstances, shorter scenarios. So that would be my advice. Keeping it short, trying to make it interactive, movement can be involved. They can use their expression so that hopefully it's easier to focus.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's great, Laura. Let's continue on.
All right, thank you. So to me, part of communicating successfully is knowing what is expected or appreciated. I know this is influenced by one's culture, including family culture, so it is important to know who we are speaking English to. I always tell my students who will be predominantly communicating with people from a specific country to do research on that culture. For example, in the US, being too direct can be rude and therefore stop you from achieving successful communication. This is why I tell my students, if they will be speaking to an American, it is helpful to use softening phrases to be more polite. I introduce my students to different softening phrases and then sentences for how they can use them. So for example, this is wrong could be, there seems to be something wrong. You're wrong could be, that is not entirely correct. Cancel the meeting could be, perhaps we should cancel the meeting. And call me could be, I was hoping you would call me, or could you please call me? So your turn. What are some other polite phrases you teach your students to use? You teach your students to use to show empathy or concern for others.
Yeah, everybody, let us know in the chat your responses to some other polite phrases you would teach your students to show empathy or concern for others. Let's see, we do have some more questions, but I'll wait, Laura, to see what other polite phrases people would use to show empathy or concern for others. We have Doha Bakar saying, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I might be mistaken, but it would be nice to know your thoughts. It seems to me that, and then we have, would you mind allowing your partner to speak first? We have Gabby Venezuela saying, putting myself in your shoes, we have lots of starters saying, do you mind sitting here? So lots of great polite phrases to teach your students to show empathy. Thank you, everybody, so much.
Perfect. So relationship management is the last element that we will discuss today. I encourage my students to practice this skill in regards to teamwork and conflict management. Earlier, I asked you to think about a time when you have had to communicate with someone when all the feelings involved were not pleasant. It can be very challenging. In grad school, I had a professor who used to require us to give feedback using the following format. When you blink, I feel blank because blank. And then the second part, which is asking a question, I picked up at a nonprofit where I used to work, and we would pair refugees resettling in California with local volunteers. We wanted the volunteers to be able to communicate problems without the typical generalizations of you always or you never, and without judgment, so such as you don't care. When the person you are talking to cares about you, sharing your feelings is more likely to have an impact than just acting mad or passing judgment. I think these are helpful skills for all of us. But in our classrooms, they're important because our students are communicating with us and with classmates. Here are some different stems for communicating feedback. When you blank, I feel blank because blank. Could you please blank? I noticed blank. I felt blank because blank. So an example of feedback using this structure, when you are late to our meetings, I feel frustrated because I have another appointment after, and we can't decide all the time we planned, and we can't dedicate all the time we planned to our project. Could you please try to be on time? In class, I like to have students practice the first part of the structure by giving classmates feedback on presentations. So instead of just saying good job or boring, I want them to focus on something specific and then communicate a feeling. Here are some example feedback sentences from some of my former students. When you talk quickly, I felt overwhelmed because it was a little hard to understand. I noticed that you used transition words. I felt thankful because I could follow your presentation better. When your speech was very descriptive, I was very pleased. And you can notice that the last one is missing the because, right? And so this is something that we're always practicing. You notice this, you tell your students, you have them practice, and you want them to think about that. Why? Because what? And so wanted you to be aware. Something we always want to check and make sure our students are adding the extra part. And it can be challenging to give feedback this way, but I think it's a great skill to have and another way for our students to practice using the emotion words that we taught them. All right, so your turn. What strategies have you used with your students to help them manage conflict with classmates during group activities?
Yeah, everybody, let us know your responses, share them in the chat or comments. What types of strategies have you used with your students to help them manage conflict with classmates during group activities? We'd love to hear your responses in the chat or comments, so please let us know. I have some good ideas, but again, Laura, I want to hear from our wonderful teachers and audience out there. So again, everybody, let us know what type of strategies you use to manage conflict with classmates during group activities. Let's see, we've got some people just saying that, oh, you may change their seat or change their groups is a good way. You can individually talk to them. First you say, I would ask them, let's see what they say. First, I would ask them to calm down and listen attentively to each other. Sometimes it works with our teenagers, okay. Lots of great questions. We have Emmanuel saying he usually tells them to use the magic words. I am sorry. That's good, Emmanuel. Let's see, we have people saying that encouraging their students to use emotion-related vocabulary and concepts to kind of talk it through and to resolve the conflict, allowing students to make assessments on each other, to learn how to disagree or to agree. And then we have a teacher who teaches at the university level saying that they made them pretend we are employees in a company dealing with a difficult clients. Ooh, that's a really good role play. I love that idea. Awesome ideas, everybody. Great strategies for dealing with conflict. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for sharing those. Now that we have defined social emotional learning and emotional intelligence, discussed benefits in communication of strong social emotional skills, and explored some ways to build these skills, you will consider how to include these in your lesson plans. So I want you to keep in mind the 4 elements that are found both in social emotional learning and in emotional intelligence: self-awareness, recognizing our own emotions; self-regulation, controlling our emotions; social awareness, being aware of others' emotions; and relationship management, developing effective relationships. Now that you know more about social emotional skills, what is one activity that you can try in the next weeks with your students to support their social emotional growth, and therefore their communication skills and academic success? I suggest you think of one specific element, so self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, or relationship management.
Yeah, everybody, let us know. Share your responses in the chats. Now that you know more about all social emotional skills, Laura shared so many great activities. So what is one activity that Laura shared with us that you can try today, tomorrow, next week with your students to support their social emotional growth and improve their communication skills? We'd love to hear from you in the chats. As Laura just said, she suggests to think of specific elements such as self-awareness or self-regulation. So yeah, please let us know. All right, Laura, we have some of our teachers saying that they're going to share the self-awareness with their students. And someone said they really like that activity, Natalia says, where you have I feel blank because blank. And lots of people saying role play on situation, displaying sensitive topics. Absolutely. People are going to talk about and share self and social awareness is where they would start. And Bobby says at the end of the lesson, ask the students to share, I feel blank in this lesson because blank. Wonderful. Yeah, so many great activities that you shared today with us, Laura. This is wonderful. Thank you all for your comments.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I love the role play ideas because there are so many scenarios and you could pick something that's an issue going on in your class, as well as outside the class, just to expose them to other things. So thank you, everyone, for allowing me to share with you today and for sharing with us your ideas.
Yes, wonderful. And thank you, Laura, for sharing your expertise on ways to incorporate social emotional learning into the EFL classroom to help build students' emotional intelligence and communication skills. We'd also like to thank you, of course, our wonderful audience, for your awesome engagement today and participation. Please, please, please continue to share your ideas through social media or with your viewing groups after the session ends.